The Lost Experiment of the Appalachians. When Monsters Were Created on American Soil by WWII. This is not merely a title. It is a warning, carved into the darkest corner of American history. A place where science, war, and isolation converge to create something unimaginable. In the deep heart of the Appalachian Mountains, where the fog clings like a suffocating blanket to the valleys and the trees stand as silent witnesses to forgotten sins, there existed a community the world was never meant to know. A place where the horrors of World War II did not end on foreign battlefields, but began anew on American soil, hidden from the eyes of a nation celebrating victory. Welcome to the Fury Night. Check if you're already subscribed to this channel. You won't want to miss our exclusive investigations into America's darkest family secrets that mainstream media refuses to cover. Hit subscribe now to join our community of truth seekers. The first whispers began to surface in the summer of 1947, 2 years after the war's end. In hushed tones, local residents of Harlan County, Kentucky, spoke of strange sounds echoing from the abandoned mining settlement of Blackidge Hollow, a place officially closed since 1943. But what they didn't know, what they couldn't have known, was that Blackidge Hollow had never truly been abandoned. It had simply been repurposed. Our story begins with Dr. Edmund Kerzner, a German-American geneticist who had worked quietly for the U.S. government during the war. Born in Munich in 1898, Kerzner fled Nazi Germany in 1936, bringing with him controversial research on human heredity and genetic isolation, research deemed too extreme even by the standards of his homeland. Desperate for any advantage in the race for scientific supremacy, American military intelligence welcomed him with open arms and sealed files. In the winter of 1942, as America mobilized its full industrial might, a secret directive was issued from Washington. Authorized under the pretense of studying environmental isolation's effects on human physiology, it was cryptically named in classified documents, Project Appalachian Genesis. The real purpose was far darker, to understand how genetic concentration could be weaponized, how bloodlines could be controlled, and what would happen when humanity's most fundamental taboo was systematically violated in the name of science. Blackidge Hollow was chosen for its perfect isolation. Nestled in a valley accessible only by a single, treacherous unpaved road, the settlement had once housed 73 coal mining families. When dangerous conditions closed the mines in 1943, the government offered generous relocation packages. Most accepted. Those who didn't were given a different kind of offer, one that came with cash payments, government rations, and a promise that their participation would serve their country. 22 families remained, 137 individuals in total, from newborns to elderly grandparents. They were told they would be part of a study on mountain living and sustainable communities. They were told their sacrifice would help American soldiers. They were told many things. None of them were the truth. Dr. Kerzner arrived in April 1943, accompanied by a team of 6 researchers, 4 military physicians, and enough supplies to last years. The settlement's church became a medical facility. The old company store was converted into a laboratory, and the mine superintendent's house became Kerzner's personal residence and command center, where he meticulously documented every aspect of what he called the greatest human heredity experiment since the pharaohs. The methodology was brutally simple. The 22 families were reorganized into 4 distinct groups, each isolated from the others by physical barriers and strict scheduling. Kerzner's team controlled everything: food distribution, medical care, work assignments, and, most importantly, reproduction. Through manipulation, coercion, and the family's desperate dependence on government resources, marriages were arranged between close relatives, brothers and sisters, cousins, and, in cases that made even some of Connor's own team resign in horror, parents and their own children. The first generation of children born under these conditions arrived in late 1943 and throughout 1944. Maria Holtcomb was the first, born December 3, 1943, to siblings Thomas and Rebecca Holtcomb, both 22 years old. The birth records, meticulously kept in Kerzner's leather-bound journals, noted Maria appeared normal at birth. But by her 6-month examination, the notations had changed, developmental delays, unusual skull bone structure, eyes that didn't track movement properly. By 1945, 17 children had been born in Black Ridge Hollow. The records show 12 exhibited what Kerzner coldly termed genetic manifestations of consanguineous origin. The language was clinical, designed to distance the researchers from the human suffering they documented. But the reality was impossible to hide behind terminology. Young David Pritchard, born in March 1944 to first cousins pressured into union, never learned to walk. His legs, according to medical notes, were malformed from birth, the bones twisted as if his genetic code had been corrupted at its most fundamental level. His parents, Samuel and Martha Pritchard, both 26, watched their only son drag himself across their cabin's dirt floors, his cries echoing through the hollow. The community began to fracture under the weight of what was happening. In the summer of 1945, as the world celebrated VJ Day, 3 families attempted to escape Black Ridge Hollow. They were stopped by military police at the valley entrance and returned. 2 weeks later, one of the fathers, 34-year-old Joseph Caldwell, was found hanging in his barn. The official report called it distress from isolation. The truth was in the note he left behind, "What they make us do here is against God and nature. I cannot watch my children suffer anymore." Perhaps the most devastating aspect was not what it did to the children, but what it did to their parents. Fathers forced to sire children with their own daughters. Mothers who watched babies born from unions with their brothers struggle for every breath. Grandparents who witnessed the systematic destruction of their family lines, all while being told it was for the greater good. By late 1946, Kerzner's journals contained detailed examinations of 43 children. The rates of genetic disorders were staggering: severe intellectual disabilities in 67%, physical deformities in 54%, blindness or severe vision impairment in 31%. And these were only the children who survived past their first year. The infant mortality rate in Black Ridge Hollow was 42%, nearly 10 times the national average. Check if you're already subscribed to this channel. The government knew. Reports were filed, inspections conducted. And yet the experiment continued. In March 1947, a young nurse named Catherine Walsh, fresh out of nursing school, smuggled out a letter to her journalist brother. She described infants born with unformed skulls, children with organs visible through translucent skin, families driven to madness. The letter never reached the newspaper. Catherine Walsh disappeared from Black Ridge Hollow in April 1947. The official record states she requested a transfer. No one who worked with her ever saw her again. What you are about to discover will change forever how you see American history. And you cannot afford to miss what comes next. By the spring of 1948, Black Ridge Hollow had become something outside the bounds of humanity. A place where the natural order was inverted, where family bonds were weaponized, and where children entered the world bearing the visible marks of science's darkest curiosity. The second generation was worse. Much worse. In Kerzner's journals, partially declassified in 1993, there are clinical photographs that even hardened researchers struggled to look at. Images of children whose faces seemed to fold in on themselves, whose limbs bent at impossible angles. Subject 47, born February 1948, the product of 3 generations of brother-sister unions, was a child named Sarah Ann Morrison. She lived only 14 months. Her spine curved in a severe S-shape from birth, her jaw incomplete, her eyes showing an awareness that made staff question if she understood her suffering. Her mother, Elizabeth Morrison, herself the product of a forced union between siblings, had stopped speaking entirely by early 1948. She would sit for hours, staring at the encircling mountains like prison walls. But it was the Patterson family that revealed the true depth of the horror. By 1948, they had been paired and repaired in combinations that defied every natural instinct. The genetic concentration was so severe that by the 3rd generation, the children barely resembled human infants at all. In June 1948, a boy named Michael was born, subject 62. Kerzner called him the logical end point of extreme consanguinity. His skull hadn't properly closed, leaving portions of the brain visible. His heart formed outside his chest cavity, beating visibly through a thin membrane. He lived for 6 hours. One witnessing physician wrote in his diary, "I have seen men torn apart by artillery, but I have never seen anything that shook me as deeply. This is not science. This is the systematic creation of suffering. May God forgive us all." The mothers began to break. In September 1948, 4 women broke into the medical facility's drug storage and consumed sedatives. 3 survived. 1, 23-year-old Anna Caldwell, did not. She had been forced to bear 3 children by her own father. All 3 died in infancy. She had chosen the only escape she could find. The children who survived faced unimaginable hardship. Of 32 children aged 2 to 5 in 1948, only 9 could walk unassisted. 12 were completely nonverbal. 17 required constant medical supervision. And yet, the experiment continued. Dr. Kerzner, now in his 50s, became increasingly detached, obsessed with data. In October 1948, a new directive came from Washington: the project was to be expanded. But something had changed in the hollow. The families were no longer compliant. On the night of November 7, 1948, as the first winter snow fell, a fire broke out in the laboratory. It consumed years of research. The official investigation cited a knocked-over kerosene heater. But witnesses reported seeing men carrying equipment from the building before the fire started. The destruction of the lab marked the beginning of the end. The experiment had failed, not in its scientific objectives, but in its fundamental premise that human beings could be treated as laboratory animals without consequence. The winter of 1948-49 transformed Blackidge Hollow into a community of broken souls trapped in a nightmare with no end. By January 1949, the population was over 200. They were prisoners in their own homes. Of 19 births that year, only 7 children survived past 6 months. Psychological fractures became impossible to ignore. Parents stopped naming newborns. Children began to grasp the terrible truth of their existence. 10-year-old Thomas Holcomb confronted Dr. Kerzner, "You did this to me. You made me wrong." Kerzner's journal noted, "Subject 1 shows increasing awareness. Recommend monitoring." A quiet resistance formed. In April 1949, a group of 8 children simply refused to comply with invasive neurological tests. Their parents did not intervene. For the first time, the machinery of control encountered organized resistance. Then arrived Lieutenant Colonel Margaret Sutherland, a military nurse assigned to inspect medical conditions. What she found horrified her. In her report, immediately classified, she compared conditions to concentration camps. In the Patterson cabin, she discovered 12-year-old Emma, confined to a room for 3 years, her spine severely curved, in constant pain. She was isolated, a project physician explained, because her emotional outbursts contaminated the data set. That evening, Sutherland wrote a detailed letter to Senator Harlan Mitchell of Kentucky, smuggling it out via a supply truck driver. The letter reached the senator on June 2, 1949. Pause here, think about Emma, 12 years old, locked in a room, suffering for science. If you feel anything, rage, sorrow, I need you to comment right now. Emma deserved better. Acknowledging these victims is how we prevent history from repeating itself. Comment now. Emma deserved better, ***. Within days, Senator Mitchell initiated a confidential inquiry. By mid-June, a secret investigation had begun. Meanwhile, in the hollow, trust had completely broken down. Families stopped cooperating. The children kept being born, and dying. Dr. Kerzner became erratic, grasping for meaning in data that had long crossed into atrocity. On August 12, 1949, federal marshals, military police, and medical personnel arrived with orders suspending all research and authorizing evacuation. Project Appalachian Genesis was terminated. But rescue was complicated. Where would they go? How could families torn apart be made whole? Kerzner was taken into federal custody. He would die in 1956, never charged. The evacuation took 2 weeks. Physicians assessing the survivors found damage exceeding their worst expectations. Of 87 surviving children, 63 showed significant genetic disorders, 42 required lifelong care, 17 were nonverbal. Adult residents showed depression rates near 90%. Genetic testing revealed a population where normal human diversity had been compressed into a horrifyingly narrow range. A compromise was reached. A new, isolated settlement was established outside Lexington, with medical facilities and ongoing care. But the damage could not be undone. Thomas Holcomb lived until 1967, an advocate for survivors, but he never escaped his chronic pain and neurological deterioration. Emma Patterson lived until 1978, never speaking or walking, finding comfort only in music and being held. In 1952, the government issued a carefully worded statement acknowledging that certain research activities may have exceeded appropriate ethical boundaries. Compensation of $5,000 to $20,000 per family was offered, enough for a modest house, not enough for 6 years of systematic torture. Check if you're already subscribed to this channel. The story echoes through time. Longitudinal studies confirmed a genetic bottleneck event with effects across generations. In 1981, journalist Robert Mulleary published interviews with aging survivors. Sarah Morrison, born in 1943, said, "They took my childhood. They took my body. Anger is too small a word." Partial declassification in 1993 revealed the experiment was also about genetic manipulation for military purposes. In 1995, President Clinton issued a formal apology. By then, only 11 original survivors were alive. In 2001, a memorial was erected in Harlan County, listing over 400 names of the dead. The inscription reads, "In memory of those who suffered so science could learn the limits of suffering." Today, in 2024, descendants still live with the consequences. The story is now a central case study in medical ethics worldwide. Its most important legacy is what it teaches us about the capacity for cruelty when human beings are dehumanized, when suffering is abstracted into data. The researchers were not monsters in the traditional sense. They were professionals who convinced themselves their work was necessary, important, patriotic. They were catastrophically wrong. The children of Blackledge Hollow deserved childhoods, love, dignity. They didn't get them. That is a stain on American history no amount of time can wash away. If you made it to the end, you've witnessed one of the darkest chapters in American scientific history. The survivors never got justice. But we can honor their memory by ensuring this story is never forgotten. These stories matter. These victims matter. Leave a comment saying Emma deserved better, to acknowledge them. Every comment is a voice saying, we remember. If you watched until here, leave a comment saying, I watched until here. Hit like if this story impacted you. Share it so others understand the real cost of unethical science. The experiment ended in 1949. The suffering continues. The only way we ensure it never happens again is by bearing witness to what happened in Blackledge Hollow, in the heart of the Appalachian Mountains, where monsters were created not through warfare, but through the systematic violation of everything that makes us human.